Bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got Bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs, we got Bows, TKOs, yeah. Bows, TKOs.
Bows and TKOs. We are live, episode 80, coming at you on this beautiful Thursday afternoon, 2025. We're back. I'm feeling refreshed after the holidays, trip to Montana. But again, I'm your host, Shane Gillette, for this weekly podcast, MMA podcast, streaming anywhere you tune into your podcast with videos on YouTube. And we got one hell of a show today. A ton of fights that have been announced over the time off. We're going to talk a little bit about Fury, Usyk, Fury Pro Grappling 12, preview the quarter one UFC event schedule, and talk about the top 10 in the UFC divisions, what fights should be made that aren't made today. And then we will preview this weekend's Fight Night Vegas back at the Apex. But yeah, I'm rocking the black and yellow, Steelers in the playoffs. You know, the NFL seasons are tough. The Steelers really peaked with Russell. We're on a 4-game losing streak. I should not have confidence, but anything can happen in the playoffs. It's Ravens, Steelers. It's exactly what I would want if it was the playoffs. A team that the Steelers are very accustomed to beating. And no Zay Flowers, anything's possible. Winner probably plays Kansas City. You know what? Let's make it happen. I'm feeling good. Not only that, we have bowl games starting today, the Final Four championship next week. Montana State lost to North Dakota State in their championship. I'm just stoked about football. It's the very end of the season. It went by too fast. But let's talk MMA and jump right in. We got some fights that have been announced. We have Cody Brundage stepping in for Ultimate Fighter alum Ryan Loder against Julian Marquez. We have Fares Ziam and Mike Davis February 1st. Pretty solid little bout there. Another injury replacement as Rodolfo Bellator is subbing in for Marcin Prachnio against Jimmy Crute. February 8th will be good to see Jimmy Crute back. And then Andre Petroski stepping in for Jacob Malkoun against Rodolfo Vieira. February 15th. I was excited to see Jacob back, but Andre's continuing to stay active. Also on that February 15th card, a big step up for the two-time stint UFC fighter Youssef Zalal against Calvin Kattar. We have Angela Hill and Ketlin Souza on that card as well. Going to February 22nd, we have Mansour Abdul Malik, the Dana White Contender Series Brute Force taking on Antonio Tricoli, as well as Henry Cejudo and Song Yadong. This will be in Seattle. We have Rob Font, Dominic Cruz, which Dominic Cruz today officially said will be his last UFC fight. We have Brandon Rival Manel Kopp in an absolute banger on March 1st, which is a fight night card at the Apex as well, sadly. We have Danny Barlow and Sam Patterson, Andrea Lee and JJ Aldrich. We have Charles Johnson and Ramazan Tamirov, Nasrat Haparest and Esteban Rabovics. That'll be a banger. Esteban and his fight in the Sphere was one of the most epic fights I've ever seen. March 8th, we have Janata Deniz and Vitor Petrino, which will be UFC 313, which will be going down in Las Vegas. We have Damon Blackshear and Cody Gibson for the March 15th Fight Night card at the Apex. I hate that we have so many Apex events to start Q1, but it is what it is. We have Nathaniel Wood and Morgan Scherer, which will be in London, the O2 card. On March 29th, we have Kelvin Gastelum and Joe Pyfer. This is back at the Apex. Sucks that will be in front of no crowd. That's going to be an absolute bananas fight. See if Joe has the cardio. And then UFC 312, a couple fights. We have Wang Kong back against Bruno Brazil, looking to right that L. Cody Hayden against Alexandre Topuria. Ilya's brother that's been helping him train. It'll be interesting to see how that IQ transfers into fighting. And then for UFC 313, we have Bruno Silva and Joshua Van. Absolute banger of a fight. Van is just staying active as ever. Myron Santos taking on Francis Marshall. And then Bruno Ferreira and Armin Petrosian, as well as Alex Morano versus Carlos Leal, and Chris Gutierrez versus Gene Matsumoto. So those are a lot of fights that have been booked for Q1. We'll talk about the events. But in other UFC news, Azamat Murzakanov suspended 180 days for a positive LGD 4033 test. They're saying this is an improperly labeled supplement. He can return May 1st. Victor Hugo and Kyung Ho Kong off the UFC roster as some of the veterans are getting removed for all this Contender Series talent. But elsewhere in the fighting world, we had Tyson Fury, Oleksandr Usyk, a lot like the first bout. Usyk just taking the jab, picking Fury away from distance to be the and still champion, and probably, in my mind, the heavyweight GOAT of boxing. Was a solid fight worth watching back. I saw it free on Twitter or X. So it was a good boxing bout, but not enough for Tyson Fury. I think he should call it, but I'm sure he'll try to make another massive payday. Over the holidays, we also had the Fury Pro Grappling 12 with a lot of UFC talent. Sean Brady got a round 2 submission via guillotine over Richie Martinez. Good performance. Pat Downey, the stud wrestler, getting a decision over UFC's Andre Petroski. Petroski, obviously there's room for him to improve in his grappling. We have Joe Pyfer with the decision over Nicholas Willie. Pat Sabatini got a straight ankle lock over Patiri Fazekis. And then Alexander Romanov got a north-south choke over Damir Rapa. PFL making some headlines as well. They are finally allowing elbows from here on out. They announced it for their championship. It is now legal in the PFL. But in terrible news for the PFL, what they did to stand out was the $1 million payday. It is no longer, as they are doing a $500,000 bonus instead of a milli. Brutal for them. And then I also forgot today, Cody Still and Rong Zhu is booked on that UFC 312 card. That is a great young prospect fight. See what Cody Still is made of. Rong Zhu trying to stay in the UFC in a second stint. But let's preview what quarter one has for us in the UFC. So obviously this weekend we got the Fight Night card. Then we have an amazing UFC 311 card that's supposed to happen at Clippers Arena, Intuit Dome. But I'm not sure what the fires that are going on. Prayers to everyone dealing with those fires, nasty stuff in LA. We have Islam Arman Sarukian, Merab Umar, Yuri Jamal Hill, Benil Dariush, Renato Moicano, Kevin Holland, Ranier de Ritter, Johnny Walker, Bogdan Guskov, Peyton Talbot, Yoni Barcelos, Jailton Almeida, Sergey Spivak. A ton of good fights. Grant Dawson, Diego Ferreira, super underrated. Carol Hosa, Eileen Perez, Ricky Tercios is fighting, and Tagir Ulanbekov is taking on Clayton Carpenter. Then we go the next week into Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, headlined by Nasruddin Imavov and Israel Adesanya. His first non-title fight in forever. We got MVP and Shara Megomedov, Shara Bullet, Yasmin Jazdavicius, and Myra Buena Silva, Demir Hadzovic, Terrence McKinney, Sergey Pavlovich, Jairzinho Rosenstrike, Saeed Nurmagomedov, Vinicius Oliveira, Khan Offley's fighting. A solid card here for Saudi Arabia, which you would expect. Andre Muniz, Ikram Alaskarov, that Farazian Mike Davis fight, and also Jamal Pogues. Then we're back to another UFC event in Sydney. We got DDP, Sean Strickland rematch, Zhang Weilei, Tatiana Suarez. We have Jimmy Crute, Rodolfo Bellato, Justin Tafa, Tom Nolan, Vyacheslav Borshev, Jack Jenkins, Gabriel Santos, the Hayden Topuria fight, the Wang Kong, Bruno Brazil fight, Cody Still, Zhu Rong, I'm sure there'll be more fights added there, as a lot of these cards aren't final. Going back to the Apex, February 15th, it's headlined by Gregory Rodriguez, Jared Cannonier, absolute banger. The Kader Zalal fight, Renat Fakhretdinov, Gabriel Bonfim, another big step for Gabriel Bonfim. Petrosky, Rodolfo Vieira, Nazim Sadikov, Ismail Bonfim. The Bonfim brothers always on the same card. Edmund Shabazian, Dylan Butka. What else we got? Jared Gordon's fighting Walter Walker, Dontel Mays, Vince Morales, Angela Hill, Ketlin Souza, and Jose Delgado versus Connor Matthews. Then we go to UFC 252 Fight Night, another Fight Night card in Seattle. We talked about the Cruz Font, Cejudo, Song Yadong fight. Absolute stud fight here. Edson Barboza, Steve Garcia. Gene Silva's back. Brendan Allen, Anthony Hernandez. Michael Chiesa with an unknown opponent. He needs to fight in Seattle. Let's make that happen, somebody. Curtis Blades against the newcomer Rizvan Kuniev. They must be high on him. He's from Dagestan, fought in the PFL. Jan Kutalaba, Ibo Aslan. Ketlin Vieira, Macy Shiasan. Chidi Nkwani is going to fight somebody. Mansur Abdul Malik, the Tricoli fight. Modestus Bukakis and Rafael Kirquera. Then we go back to the Apex. Sad this is in the Apex. Royval, Manel Kopp. Asu Almabayev, Steve Ursig. Hyder Amil, William Gomez. Esteban Rabovics, Nasrat Haparist. Charles Johnson. Lucas Almeida. Danny Barlow versus Sam Patterson. Montana De La Rosa versus Luana Carolina. The Andrea Lee, J.J. Aldrich fight and Cody Brundage fight that was supposed to happen. He's getting a... Who's stubbing in for him? Cody Brundage, Julian Marquez. And the Steve Ursig fight is definitely not official against Asu Almabayev, so it seems like that's trying to get closed in on. UFC 313, Amanda Lemos, Yasmin Lucindo, Bruno Silva, Joshua Van, and this is in Las Vegas again. Janata Denise, Victor Petrino, Bruno Ferreira, Armin Petrosian, Myron Santos, Francis Marshall, Alex Morano, Carlos Leal, Gene Matsumoto, Chris Gutierrez. Some solid matchmaking for the Q1 and some bangers. Going into the fight night on March 15th at the Apex, Damon Blackshear, Cody Gibson, Waldo Cortez Acosta, Ryan Spann, Stephanie Luciano, Sam Hughes. Going into March 22nd in London, Jan Blachowicz, Carlos Olberg. Huge step up for Carlos. We haven't seen Jan active in a while. Marcin Tybura, Mick Parkin seems to be the next big heavyweight from London. Trains with Tom Aspinall. Umar C. Alonzo Menefield. Christian Leroy Duncan's fighting. The Nathaniel Wood, Morgan Scherer fight. That's going to be awesome. A lot on the line for both of those guys. Loner Kavanaugh, Felipe Dos Santos. Nathan Fletcher, Colin Lawgrain. A lot of prospects here. Pooja Tomar versus Shauna Bannon. And then the final fight for Q1 on March 29th at the Apex, Joe Pyfer, be like Joe, Kelvin Gastelum, Jose Medina, Kevin Borjas, Ronaldo Rodriguez, Edgar Shirez, CJ Vergara. Many good fights. And then UFC 314 is scheduled to be back in Miami. So let's talk about fighters that don't have official fights booked and where I would like to see them booked and what I think the UFC should do, starting in the flyweight division. I want to see Pantoja, Kaikar of France. There is not a proper matchup for him. Maybe they throw him some other random, but they haven't fought since The Ultimate Fighter. It seems like the next best thing, because let's give these flyweights new opponents. And that's why I'd rather see Brandon Moreno take on Steve Ursig. Steve coming off some losses. I could see the Asu Almabayev fight, but I want him to fight Brandon Moreno, which will then give us Amir Albazi and Tatsuro Taira. Man, that would be a ton of fun. Alex Perez could fight Asu Almabayev. And then Tim Elliott could fight Kai Asakura. In the bantamweight division, I'm expecting Sean O'Malley taking on Peter Yan in a rematch. That first fight was so good. Corey Sandhagen and Davison Figueiredo. And then Marlon Vera and Mario Bautista. Moving into 145 in the featherweight division, I think we'll see Ilia Topuria, Diego Lopez. There may be a chance that it's Volkanovski next. But I think Diego being the backup fighter, they should make that happen. Then we could get Volk versus Movsar Evloev, the winner for the title. Yair Rodriguez versus Aljamain Sterling. That would be so much fun. As well as these two, Brian Ortega, Arnold Allen, Josh Emmett, Leron Murphy. Absolute bangers. Then in the very stacked lightweight division, I would love to see Charles Oliveira and Max Holloway. I do think Max is going to be a lightweight from here on out. Justin Gaethje and Mateusz Gamrot. And then I think Dustin Poirier's final fight will be against Dan Hooker. And Michael Chandler, it seems rumored, he will be fighting Paddy Pimblett, and I'm super into that. Moving into welterweight, I think we all know it's going to be Bilal and Shavkat Rakhmonov. I'm taking Leon Edwards and Jack Della Maddalena. Sean Brady versus Joaquin Buckley. Ian Machado Gary versus Gilbert Burns. And Colby Covington versus Jeff Neal. On the last podcast before the end of the year, I talked about who I thought would be the champions of the divisions. If you haven't checked that out, tune in to episode 79. Every year I say this is who I think will be the champions at the end of the next year. And I did pretty good coming into this year. In the middleweight division, I think Khamzat Chimaev sits out and fights the winner of DDP versus Sean Strickland. He's due for a title shot. Kyle Baralho versus Marvin Vittori. Roman Dolidze versus Paula Costa. And then in the light heavyweight division, Alex Pereira, Magomed Ankalaev. Finally get that done. And then another amazing stylistic fight. Alexander Rakic versus Khalil Roundtree Jr., Nikita Krylov versus Dominic Reyes, and Volkan Ozdemir versus Robert Whitaker. Robert is hinted moving up, much like Max Holloway. It doesn't seem like he'll be fighting for the middleweight championship anytime soon. So let's go up to light heavyweight, take on Volkan Ozdemir. In the heavyweight division, I do think we get John Jones, Tom Aspinall. And then Cyril Gane will get the winner of that fight, most likely Tom Aspinall, because John would retire. Alexander Volkov will get the winner of the Blades Rizvan Kuniev fight. And then I want to see Derek Lewis versus Tai Tuivasa 2. In the women's side of MMA, in the strawweight division, I have Yan Xiaonan versus Virna Jandiroba, Marina Rodriguez and Tabitha Ricci. In the flyweight, Valentina Shevchenko versus Manon Fiorot. That's the much anticipated fight of the division. Another big stepping stone as Alexa Grasso takes on Erin Blanchfield. Macy Barber versus Rose Namajunas. A lot of smoke up on that fight as they don't like each other. So as long as Macy Barber comes back healthy. We have Natalia Silva and Caitlin Sermonara. And Jessica Andrade taking on Viviane Araujo. Then in the bantamweight division, we should get Juliana Pena, Kayla Harrison. Raquel Pennington versus Norma Dumont. Irene Aldana versus Myra Bueno Silva. Holly Holm versus Carol Hosa. And Yana Santos versus Misha Tate. Those are the fights that I want to see made. And it'll be interesting to see what the UFC brass does. We'll kind of come back and see how my predictions go. A lot of amazing fights to be made. I expect Q2 to be an amazing, amazing quarter for the UFC. But let's talk about what we got in front of us. UFC Fight Night Vegas 101. And to preview this card, I'm going to say this is a solid Apex card. The prelims, of course, are lacking a lot of young and up-and-coming names. The Curtis and Kopylov fight, as well as the Soriano Urosh Medic fight, I think those are the highlights. But I am previewing this card overall a 4 out of 10. I'm sure it could deliver more by the way the fights end up. But some good fights we will not break down. You have Contender Series alum Jose Johnson taking on LFA alum Felipe Lopez. We have Contender Series alum Marco Tulio taking on Ihor Potieria. We have Contender Series alum Andreas Gustafsson taking on Preston Parsons. And then Contender Series alum Bruno Lopez and Magomed Gadzhiyasulav. So a lot of Contender Series alums stepping in, and I'm sure we will see that in a lot of prelim bouts coming in. But let's kick it off in the prelims. We got one fight before the main card. We are going to talk about Thiago Moises, who's 29 years old with an 18-8 record, taking on Trey Samurai Ogden, 35 years old with an 18-6 record. Now, like I said, the matchmakers have done good. This is a fun, evenly made matchup for the prelims, and there is a ton on the line for both men in their primes. You know, Thiago definitely has struggled to build momentum of late. He's fought very stiff competition, but as he's in his prime at 29 years old, he's taken on a tough veteran who is well-rounded, and with a win here for Thiago, I think he will be fighting in the top 20 of the lightweight division, which a loss here for either dude puts you in kind of the deep waters of the division and purgatory, and you do not want to end up there. So, breaking it down, Thiago trains out of American Top Team. He has a black belt in BJJ. He's an RFA alum and former champion. He's also an LFA and Contender Series alum. He's on a one-fight losing streak. He's 3-2 since 2022, and 8 of his 18 wins are via submission. Now, Trey is on a 2-fight winning streak. He's been around as well. He's a Titan FC, Bellator, LFA, and Fury FC alum. He is 3-2-1 since 2022. 11 of his 18 wins are via submission, but 3 of his 6 losses are also via submission, which is very interesting against Moises. So he is to submit or be submitted. Now, I do think this will be a pretty even fight when it comes to the striking. I like to think Thiago would be the better striker, and he'll show improvement, which he has a little bit. But he did get dominated by Ludovic Klein in June, so we'll see what he's done in his fighting camp and at the gym. But I do think Thiago is going to need to get takedowns and control Trey in this fight, and that's not going to be an easy feat. I do think that he finds a way because he is a better grappler, as most of Ogden's submission victories are because he beats people up, then he goes for the submission. Moises is a submission artist. The fight is going to go everywhere. There should be chaos, but I am taking Thiago Moises. I am putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. Into the main card. What an opener this is. We have Punahele Puna Soriano, 32 years old with a 9-4 record, taking on Urosh the Dr. Medic, 31 years old with a 10-2 record. Again, you want to talk about another violent matchup? That's what this fight is. It's a great fight to kick off the main card. It's a shame they have to perform here in the Apex, but we get to hear how hard they're hitting. And both men are well-rounded, but I do believe Puna is going to have success early with his striking, but he has shown to slow down as the fight goes on, and that's where Euro shines. So as the fight gets later, I do think it'll favor Medic, but for the sake of picking, we'll see. Breaking it down, Puna trains out of Extreme Couture. He has a brown belt in judo. He has a D3 wrestling background out of Wartburg College. He's a PFL, Titan FC, LFA, and Contender Series alum. And all in one fight, he has a ton of records. He has the most significant ground strikes landed in a bout in UFC history and in welterweight history, which was 136 against Miguel Baeza. He had the most total ground strikes landed in a welterweight bout at 317. The highest significant strike differential in a UFC welterweight bout. He had 137 more significant strikes in that fight against Baeza. He has the highest strike differential for total strikes in a 3-round bout at 309. The most total strikes landed in a round in UFC history. He had 184 in round 3. So hopefully he could keep that pace and that cardio in this fight. He's on a 1-fight winning streak, 2-3 since 2022, and 6 of his 10 wins are via knockout. Now, Urosh trains out of King's MMA. He has a blue belt in BJJ, an orange belt in judo. He's a Contender Series alum, on a 1-fight winning streak, 3-1 since 2022, and 8 of his 10 wins are via knockout. Now, I am going to believe Puna will be pressuring forward and will look for takedowns early and often. Usyk is going to have to weather that early storm and just continue to pick at Puna as much as he can. Puna has definitely fought better competition this far and needs to make things happen in the middle of his prime window at 32, so the time is now. Usyk hasn't faced the same level of competition, but he is also in his prime and he is no slouch. But I am taking Puna Soriano, but I am not putting this on any parlays where possible. Moving on, we got Christian C-Rod Rodriguez, 27 years old with an 11-2 record, taking on Austin Bashi, 23 years old with an undefeated 13-0 record, very impressive at 23 years old. And this is a massive UFC debut for the young Bashi. It is almost reminiscent when Christian Rodriguez had to take on Raul Rosas Jr. And in that fight, Christian made Raul learn a very big, massive lesson. You can't just sell out in the first round. You have to be prepared for 15 minutes. And I have a feeling this is what Austin is in for. He is a very aggressive fighter. He does have good wrestling, but Rodriguez has shown he can hang and outstrike his opponents as well. Breaking this down, Christian trains at a Rofu Sport MMA Academy. He's a Bellator, LFA, and Cage Fury alum. He's on a 1-fight losing streak, but is 4-1 in the UFC. 4 of his 11 wins are via submission, 3 via knockout, so 7 of 11 via finish. Now, Austin is a Contender Series alum. This is his UFC debut. 5 of his 13 wins are via submission, 3 via knockout, so 8 of his 13 have come via finish. Now, Austin has been very hyped up as one of the more impressive young UFC prospects since his Dana White Contender Series fight, but I don't think at this point in his career he's ready for what Rodriguez is capable of and what he's going to bring, unless he gets a first-round finish, which is possible. This hits a little home because Tommy Gunn, who trains here with Sean O'Malley at the Red Hawk Academy, was supposed to fight Bashi, but got injured before that Contender Series fight. Bashi is the real deal, but right now I'm taking Christian Rodriguez. I'm taking the underdog, and he's coming to eat. But I'm not putting this on a parlay. The odds are a little head-scratching to me. Moving on, we have Roman Kopylov, 33 years old with a 13-3 record, taking on Chris Action Man Curtis, 37 years old with a 31-11 record. And this has Fight of the Night written all over it. I mean, this is a big-time fight, and this is another fight that deserves a crowd, but it is what it is. Chris, he's 37, but he has fought his ass off in some very close fights. I do think Roman in his prime is going to be too strong and too powerful. But breaking this down, Roman is a southpaw fighter. He's a Fight Nights Global alum and former champion with 1 successful title defense. He's on a 1-fight winning streak. He's 5-1 since 2022. 11 of his 13 wins are via knockout, and 2 of his 3 losses are via submission. Now, Chris trains out of Extreme Couture. He has a purple belt in BJJ. He's the 2021 Comeback Fighter of the Year. He's on a 1-fight losing streak. He's 3-1 since 2022. The old man's been active even with a torn hamstring. And 17 of his 31 wins are via knockout. It seems like, even for me, Chris is always an underdog. And nobody really gives him much credit, but man, is he a dog. And he's going to come forward. He's going to look to put Roman in a place he doesn't want to be. It'll be interesting to see if Chris can stay close in range, kind of in the pocket, they say, and continue to outstrike Kopylov with his boxing. Because if he lets Kopylov have distance and let him get those kicks and power shots off, I do think Kopylov will have success. This is a tough fight to pick, but I'm taking Roman Kopylov. I am putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Cesar Cecina Almeida, 36 years old with a 6-1 record, taking on Abdul Razak Al Hassan, 39 years old with a 12-6 record. Now, Abdul has been with the UFC for some time. He's a powerful striker who's almost 40 years old and hasn't had much success of late. Cesar is a kickboxer who comes into the UFC and has had success as long as the fight stays standing. Breaking it down, Cesar has a kickboxing style. He's an orthodox fighter. He's a Glory alum. He won the WGP in Super Combat and kickboxing. He's on a one-fight winning streak. He's 3-1 in the UFC, and he does have a 4-inch leg reach advantage. Now, Abdul has a judo and Muay Thai style. He trains at a Team Elevation. He has a black belt in BJJ. He's a Bellator and Legacy FC alum. He's on a one-fight losing streak with the no contest. He's 1-2-1 since 2022, and all 12 of his wins are via knockout. Now, personally, I do think Cesar is going to be too fast and will move too well for Abdul. I don't think Abdul is going to have success unless he tries to shoot takedowns, which isn't his strong suit, and tries to get Cesar down. And I don't think he will have success there either. Cesar is definitely focused on that department. There is a chance Abdul catches him in a knockout, but I'm taking Cesar Almeida. I am putting him on that parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. Moving on. We have Santiago, the Argentine Dagger Ponzinibbio, 38 years old with a 30-8 record, taking on Carlston Mocambique Harris, 37 years old with a 19-6 record. Now, the ages speak for themselves, but this is a veteran showdown between two men who probably need a win to keep their UFC careers alive. That's a lot of pressure. Both men have had their days when they were younger, but the pressure is on them now, and it should make for a good fight because both men should take chances. Breaking this down, Santiago trains out of American Top Team. He has a black belt in BJJ. 2 of his last 4 fights have been Fight of the Night or Performance of the Night. He's an Ultimate Fighter Brazil alum. He's on a 2-fight losing streak and is 1-3 since 2022. 16 of his 29 wins are via knockout, and 4 of his 8 losses are also via knockout. So to knock out or be knocked out. Now, Carlston has a brown belt in BJJ, a black belt in Luta Livre. He's a Brave alum and former champion. He's on a 1-fight losing streak, 2-2 since 2022. 6 of his 19 wins are via submission, 5 via knockout, so 11 of his 19 wins via finish. 3 of his 6 losses are also via knockout, and he is sporting a 3-inch reach advantage. Now, clearly, neither of these men are in their primes or are as fast as they once were with their hands, but both men have not fought to a decision once since 2022. So I'd like to think that both men are down to sit and trade shots and get after it. For that reason, I'm taking Santiago Ponzinibbio. I am putting him on my parlay. We marking that ish down, and we getting that bread. What sets us up for the women's main event, this was supposed to happen in December in Tampa Bay, but they changed it to the main event. We get a rematch. We have Amanda Ribas, 31 years old, with a 12-5 record and the number 6 next to her name, taking on Mackenzie Dern, 31 years old with a 14-5 record and the number 8 next to her name. Now, the first fight here came in 2019, and in that fight, Amanda won by decision. She was able to outstrike and outgrapple Mackenzie with her wrestling. Now, both women are smack in the middle of their primes, both 31 years old, and they are the best version of themselves today. Mackenzie has struggled against the better strikers in the division, as she clearly lives off grappling and jiu-jitsu, and she doesn't have the striking technicality other women do, although she's been hard at work in that department. Now, Amanda doesn't have a ton of striking skill either, but she lacks the power, but she does have the quick speed and is technical when she throws. So much like the first fight, I can see her outpointing Dern to a decision. And since their first fight, Amanda has bounced back and forth from flyweight and strawweight and has fought some very close decision fights, but she really hasn't had a ton of success besides her recent win against the young Luana Pinheiro, which was very impressive. and she battled pretty tough against Rose Namajunas. But Mackenzie has had some okay wins at strawweight, including Lupi Godinez and Angela Hill. But unless she's going to be able to take Amanda down and control her, I don't think much changes from the first fight. Breaking it down, Amanda trains out of American Top Team. She has a black belt in BJJ and Judo. She's a Jungle Fight alum and former champion. She's on a 1-fight losing streak, 2-3 since 2022. 3 of her 5 losses are via knockout, and she has a 3-inch reach advantage. Now, Mackenzie has a BJJ style. She has a 3rd-degree black belt in BJJ. 2 of her last 4 fights have been fight of the night. She shows up, she shows out, and it's not for a lack of trying when she's getting outstruck. She has the most submission wins in UFC Women's Strawweight Division history with 4. Also the most submission attempts in UFC Women's Strawweight Division history with 15. She's a Legacy FC, LFA, and Invicta alum. She's on a 1-fight winning streak and even 3-3 since 2022. And 7 of her 14 wins are via submission. Now, neither of these women are really known for getting finishes, so I expect this to be a close decision and very similar to the first fight, as Amanda is probably going to win on volume. If Dern can stay aggressive, stay in close, and land power shots, she is powerful. She might have a chance, but I do think her success comes from getting takedowns and keeping Ribas down, and I'm not betting on that to happen. For that reason, I'm taking Amanda Ribas, but I am not putting this on any parlays where possible. Both women looking good, fan favorites, keen to the eye. We're back to the apex. We're back with MMA action, and no more weeks off. We have back-to-back weeks with 1 week off, but then it's 9 consecutive weeks of UFC action. Next weekend, UFC 311, 2 belts on the line. I cannot wait for that Islam Arman Sarukian rematch, and it'll be fun to see Merab and how he could do against Umar Nurmagomedov. That's episode 80. I'm your host, Shane Gillette. Go Steelers. I'll see you next week.